So this is going to be my perspective or review of the 2019 remake of Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch. I wrote a script for it, and I hope that maybe I'll go off the script a little bit and try to be as open-heartedly as possible, because this game is sort of special to me in a way. I have very fond memories of playing this. Now, I'm not that old that I would actually own the old Game Boy. The first console I had was the Game Boy Advance SP. Actually, the one with the special backlit version. It had like a brighter screen, so it was at the end of its lifetime. But thanks to this console being backwards compatible, I was also able to experience many classic Game Boy games, such as Link's Awakening, which, really made me have a good experience with them. Let's leave the game aside for a while, and the first thing that really came to my mind with this game is that it's really rare to get a 2D Legend of Zelda game. Now, Legend of Zelda started as a 2D top-down video game. Zelda 2 tried to go into a side-scroller video game. With Ocarina of Time, we went into 3D Zelda games, which became sort of the main Nintendo's flagship on the Nintendo consoles. 2D Zelda games, for the most part, were basically left for the portable consoles. Right, because the old portable consoles, such as the DS or the 3DS, they were not really capable of playing full 3D games. I mean, you had Ocarina of Time remake on the 3DS, but the 3DS was nowhere near to have like actual third-person video games in 3D world. So the portable consoles were perfect for Nintendo to release their 2D Zelda games on. Now, despite there being so many 2D Zelda games on the portable consoles, we actually did not get many remakes of the old 2D video games. I mean, there's like ports, like Four Swords Anniversary Edition, for example, but not like an actual remake. I remember I always fantasized that there could be like a Minish Cap remake on the Nintendo 3DS, and the 3D pop-out effect could make the grass pop out and stuff like that. I'm not the only one who fantasized about that. It's a pretty simple idea to get, but, sadly, we never really got anything like that. In fact, the only real remake we got on the 3DS was of the Ocarina of Time, a 3D Zelda game, so the problem is, of course, that once the Nintendo Switch came out, it seemed like that we wouldn't really get any 2D Zelda games anymore, because with the Nintendo Switch there's no real reason to have them, because Switch is well capable of having 3D games. So in a way, this game was a very pleasant addition, not only because of Link's Awakening being a very nice game, but also because it's a return of 2D Zelda games after quite a long time. So this was yet another reason why a lot of us were very happy to have this game announced. But anyway, let's go into the game, Link's Awakening. As you start to play the game, the most breathtaking part is the opening sequence. I gotta say, I always liked the old Game Boy animated sequence, but this one was animated incredibly faithfully. I just can't fanboy enough over it. It's the perfect remake. It's like everything is there like it should be. Link on the ship, and there's the drama element to it. They didn't change anything, they didn't add anything excessive, but they just added like little details like superior animation, details in animation, nothing that really changes the thing too much, but it just makes it so much better. It's something that I would call really a perfect remake. Now, in-game graphics are also kinda faithful to the original. The game developers went with this interesting 3D retro style, in which of course all the graphics are remade into 3D graphics, everything is a 3D model now, but in a way, the way it looks, it sort of remains very close to the original. It all still feels very blocky, if you know what I mean, and everything looks very much like it should. All the characters have most of the things we would expect them to have. Personally, I have a bit of a gripe with Link looking like a puppet. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I can't really complain all that much because, you know, of course the old Game Boy game was very limited, and if you want to, you know, remake him too much, then you're going to go too far away from the way the original game looked, so it is for what it is. But in general, when you actually play the game and walk around the overworld, it just looks beautiful. Especially if you actually played the old game. Having the old simple pixels now being turned into this 3D world just looks really great. It looks very nice, and everything is just like it is, like pretty much every single bush is in the same place as it should be. So in this way it's a perfect nostalgia revisiting trip. The overworld has this interesting tilt shift blur effect, like the top and the bottom of the screen are slightly blurry. I like that a lot. It looks very pretty. Now, one thing that is kind of different visually wise is, of course, the old Game Boy had a very small screen, meaning that Link took a relatively large percentage of the screen simply because if you made him any smaller, then you wouldn't see him, of course. Now, here, this is no longer necessary, right? Because the Switch has a lot larger of a screen. So what they did is they sort of made it so you can partially see on the neighbor screens. The tilt shift effect kind of comes in useful here because it doesn't allow you to see too much, but still, it is worth mentioning that this, while makes the game visually better, it also partially affects the gameplay. Of course, it's slightly easier because now you can see the neighbor screen, but I don't know, it makes the game more navigable, so I can't complain about it at all. I should also mention that the music is very well remade. All the classic tunes are now remade with modern orchestra, and it just sounds amazing. It's music to my... again, if I have to nitpick, I think that there are tunes like The Forest, for example, which are not quite as catchy, but that's sort of an advantage of the retro video games, because retro video games were very, you know, relatively limited of how far the sound spectrum goes. A lot of the tunes were incredibly catchy simply due to they had to be relatively simple, which of course makes them more catchy. But now here, when it's remade with a modern orchestra, of course, you do lose a little bit of catchiness, but objectively the quality is better, so, what can I say? But I also should mention that one of the biggest gripe I have with modern renditions of Zelda, like Breath of the Wild, is the fact that these old classical Zelda tunes don't really make an appearance. Like, why not? In older Zelda, it was pretty common that the same tunes would be reused over and over again, but with Breath of the Wild, they sort of went for this style that not really, most of the soundtrack was completely original. Well, whatever. Now, Link's Awakening by itself is a very odd Zelda game. It definitely stands out, and the reason for that is because of its development history. Basically, originally, this was supposed to be a port of Link to the Past, so they would want to bring the Super Nintendo game on the Game Boy, but obviously doing so would mean huge limitations to the game, so developers, they decided that they're not really worth it because it would just be a lame version of Link to the Past. So the developers came up with an idea to make almost like a wacky parody adventure of Zelda, like parody of Zelda. And Nintendo agreed with their ideas with a condition that classic settings such as Hyrule should not be used, and, well, the result is this. So, after the events of Link to the Past, Link got bored with Hyrule and went on an adventure, of course.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
And on his travels, a storm caught him, so the ship he was on was struck by lightning, it sunk, and eventually he woke up on this mysterious Koholint island. This girl named Marin found him there and she brought him to her house. So Link goes around the island, he first tries to find his sword, which luckily was flushed on the beach of the island, and there he finds a mysterious owl. You can assume that it's the same owl as it was in Link to the Past. Anyway, the owl tells him that he will not be able to leave the island until the mysterious windfish, which sleeps in the egg, which is on top of the volcano of the island. So until that windfish inside the egg is woken up, Link will not be able to leave the island, apparently. So there's no Hyrule here, there's no Zelda, there's no Triforce. But besides this, the game also actually features tons of references to Nintendo characters. Many characters from Mario series make an appearance, there's Goombas, there's even a photo of Princess Peach in the game. So as you start to play the game, very soon you will see that something is off. This is not like an ordinary adventure of Link. The game's story is very easy, just like I told you. That's pretty much it as far as the story goes. Link is on the island, he needs to wake the windfish, and that's pretty much it. Now, as he progresses through the dungeons, we get slight hints of more about the true nature of this island and the windfish. It's revealed to us slowly throughout each dungeons. Now, the most glaring difference is that there's no Zelda in this game. She is mentioned at the beginning of the game, but besides that reference, she never actually makes an appearance, so Legend of Zelda without Zelda. Now, this brings a relatively big difference because usually Zelda games follow this so-called damsel in distress narrative, meaning that in pretty much every single Zelda game, the main girl, Zelda, will get kidnapped, she will be taken away, and this serves as a motivator for Link to go on an adventure. Now here we actually have Zelda's replacement, we have Marin. She's present there, but the story does not work in the same way. She does not ever actually get captured and thus is not actually a factor in Link's motivation to complete his quest. She's just there, she's part of the, she's there as the story unfolds. Sometimes she also goes around with Link, but, it's not like it's in other Zelda games. Gameplay-wise, to be honest, this means zero difference, but story-wise, actually it makes the story a bit more interesting. While I love classic Zelda games, such as Link to the Past, one has to admit that as far as story goes, there's not that much there. I guess there is some backstory, but basically Ganon is evil because he's evil and he kidnaps Zelda because he has to, so Link can go on an adventure. But here we genuinely have this intriguing backstory with this mysterious windfish character. What the fuck is that all about? It's so random, this huge egg on an island, what the hell? Honestly, it's a lot more interesting that that typical bad guy who's bad guy just because he has to be. And the fact that Marin is not locked in a dungeon like Zelda all the time actually means that, Link can talk with her as the story goes on and she can be part of the story, which is important for character development. So some actual rapport between, characters can actually build up, there can actually be a relationship, some story can unfold, which even leads to some pretty wholesome moments, such as there's a very nice beach scene where Marin talks with Link and she talks about how she wonders what is going on behind the ocean, if there really is a world besides the island on which she lived all her life. So, we get a look inside how a character living on that island feels like, and it is easy to relate, right? We can imagine that we could potentially be the ones living on an island like that, and we can imagine that it would certainly open up emotions like that, making us wonder of, is there anything else besides this island we're living on? Through the game, hints will be thrown at Link, which will make you speculate that the things are not like we might think. So partially they're being thrown at you by the bosses actually, so they will hint you about the nature of the windfish, and partially by this owl statues, which they will also slowly give you hints about the nature of the windfish. And the way the story is told is quite interesting, because, after every dungeon, you get to know a little bit about the windfish. You get a piece of information every single time, which allows you to, kind of ponder and think about what's going on. And it allows you to make your own theories of, what the fuck this fish even is. It's so random, right? You want to know what it is. So in this case, it's also another motivator for you to continue the quest, because, you know, besides getting new cool items after beating a dungeon, you will also get a piece of information which will leave you closer to knowing the truth. I didn't want to talk too much about the gameplay here, but, you know, I think I'll mention a couple of things which are especially worth mentioning. One of my gripes with the old game was that, you know, the old Game Boy had very few buttons. So for picking up pots, you had to equip the power bracelet manually every single time. So let's say one button is for the sword and the other one is for the shield. You see a pot, you want to lift it up. You have to switch the shield for the power bracelet. Now you can pick the pot and throw it. And you have to switch items all the time, every single time. If you want to use Pegasus boots for running, again, you have to switch the button. Of course, it makes sense because Game Boy is relatively limited. Although personally, they could have used select, if I'm honest. But whatever, let's leave that aside. Because Nintendo Switch has more buttons, you know, this is very conveniently solved. Now, basically, the power bracelet becomes automatic. So you can just pick up the pot whenever you would like, just like pretty much every single newer Zelda game, so to say. And also the Pegasus boots are automatically assigned to the L button, which also means that it's so much easier to do that, and the shield is also on the R button, so again, much more easier to use now. In this way, the game is made slightly easier because it does make you more flexible as you play. You have access to more items on a press of a button, so you're more likely to use them because you don't have to press start and, you know, stop the game for a while. As far as gameplay differences goes, there is one thing I don't like that much. So when you fight the knights, in this game, to fight them, you need to block their attacks with your shield. For some weird reason, this will confuse them. Yeah, they had no idea that an enemy could use a shield. Who would have thought? Anyway, this confuses them and leaves them open for an attack. Now, you know, while it took me a while to figure it out, once you do figure it out, it makes them super easy and actually not a challenge at all anymore. So I don't know, I don't like this change at all. Anyway, about 3/4 into the game, well, spoilers from here on, 3/4 into the game, somewhere like that, you will go into an ancient shrine, you will fight a huge knight, and after that, you will find an ancient mural, which will reveal to you that it's actually all just a dream. Of course, it's not real, so the windfish, the Holland Islands, Marin, the enemies, the castle you visited, the beautiful beaches, the mountains in the game, the fox that's there, everything on the island is basically figment of Link's dreams. It's all a dream. He is stuck in a dream and he will not be able to wake up before the windfish ends. It's a bit of a twist. I think that's, to be honest, today probably a lot of people know it already, and if you know it, it's gonna sorta break it. But I remember when I played the game, I had no idea that it was a dream, and it actually came quite as a little bit of a shock. So, in a way, you know, it creates an interesting situation, because now Link is presented with the fact that if he's going to wake up the windfish, of course he will wake up, which means that it's a dream, right? Everything will just disappear. It will only be his memory. So it creates sort of this interesting situation that should Link even continue at this point, you know? We're 3/4 into the game, we got attached to the island, to the characters. It's a pretty island, right? Why wouldn't Link just stay here? Now, of course, this is not something that the game explicitly throws at you. This is a simple Game Boy game, right? The way it is that the game presents you with the information, and it's up to you, up to the player to process that. So while you play the game, you can think about this, you know, you can make a dilemma for yourself, but to be honest, you can just ignore all of this altogether. If we're honest, it's just a video game after all, so who cares if the video game is a dream or not, right? It makes no difference. You remember how I said that Marin doesn't get kidnapped? There's actually one short scene in which she gets kidnapped. She's stuck on a bridge and Link saves her. It creates, a relatively tense moment, which is interrupted by a third character. Well, anyway, after finding all the instruments, there will be one final, relatively bittersweet meeting between Marin and Link. And after that, well, it's time to go to the egg. Now, when we go to the egg, I gotta say that the visuals of the mountaintop are just stunning. By far my favorite part of the game. I always loved this part, even in the old Game Boy games, the tall heights were always beautiful. And the theme was this exciting, upbeat, it just fits the atmosphere. So we have this mountain and sea in the background. It's beautiful, it reminds me of the Adriatic coast, which is also beautiful, but it's hot there, so you don't want to go hiking unless you are very brave. Anyway, we go to the egg, all the instruments play, and this cracks up an opening in the egg. Now you can enter it, right? There's a short maze sequence, and after that, it's the final boss. Now Link's Awakening actually features one of more interesting final bosses. Tying it to the theme of dreaming, Link will confront some of the more iconic bosses of the franchise from the previous games, including even Ganon. Now, I don't know what exactly this one is, but it's really scary. It just keeps creeping after you, so just better kill it with fire. Now, after beating the final nightmare, Link will finally get to meet this famous windfish. The windfish will express gratitude to Link. It will say that it's in the nature of dreams to end. It was a beautiful adventure, but ultimately, Link must leave it behind. But the beautiful memory of it remains, and in a way, this makes it all true. It's a message very true to life. What follows is another amazing animated sequence. Link finally wakes up at the sea. He will be a bit saddened, but then the windfish will appear and fly over him. And the animators here did an awesome job of conveying the size and the mass of this huge whale just flying over Link. And the design of it is beautiful, and it's true to the original. You can compare one to the other and pretty much follows itself frame by frame, but only that the animation is improved and the overall experience is made a lot better. So just like the game, this ending also stands out from how a Zelda ending usually looks like. Usually Zelda endings are very happy. Think Link to the Past, there's this happy song, everyone is happy. Usually everything is well, happy ending, like a fairy tale. But this one is a bit different, right? I mean, Link woke up the windfish, he's alive, so it's good that all is well. But at the end of the day, he's still stuck at sea. He has nothing but that piece of wood he's sitting on, all the items he got during the game, the people he met, all of that, the relationships he made. It's all just a figment of his imagination, it's all just a dream, and at this point, it's nothing. It's no longer there. It's just Link stuck in the middle of the sea. Now, we still hear the seagulls, so this is a reasonable assumption that shore is pretty close. So it's also a reasonable assumption that Link will not die, because he's still in the middle of the ocean, right? Don't forget that. Likely he will live, but we can assume that it's gonna take a lot of effort for him to get back to shore and get a drink of water, which he probably really wants at this point. However, the smile he makes at the end sort of hints that he is confident and happy and, he's fighting onwards. Now, I should mention that this game always had a secret ending. If you beat the game, and it's the same in the remake, so if you beat the game with 0 deaths, a silhouette of Marin will appear in the sky. It's gonna dissolve and then a seagull will fly behind it. So maybe it's hinting to the fact that Marin expressed a wish to become a seagull, and later she said she made a wish to the windfish. So did she materialize out of Link's streams, maybe? Who knows? The game doesn't give us a straight answer, and honestly, I like it best this way. It leaves the field open for us to speculate about it. Anyway, it was not like a very technical review of how the gameplay works like. You know, honestly, I could have talked about that as well, but I'm sure many other people talked about it. It's, you know, it's your typical 2D Zelda game, I should say, if I have to sum it up. It's great, it's great. But overall, it's a great classic Zelda game. The gameplay, even though I didn't talk about it that much, it's fun, it's great. But besides the gameplay, what really sticks out most of this game is, first of all, this story, which is very, you know, it's unlike most other Zelda games. You know, maybe you could have Majora's Mask as an example of something that also stands out a little bit. But other than that, you know, it's quite unique in itself. Honestly, I wholeheartedly recommend you to pick this up. I think you should go for the Switch version. I would recommend, you know, the old Game Boy version if it wasn't for having to switch buttons all the time. This one just makes it so much more convenient by having the power bracelet assigned automatically. It just makes life so much better. So yeah, go ahead and try it, and let's hope that in the future we will get to see more 2D Zelda games and, you know, hopefully a remake of some other classic 2D Zelda games. That would be nice. Maybe we could get Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, hopefully with even a new Oracle game, which was hinted at one point but never delivered. Or maybe Minish Cap, that would be really cool. Anyway, that's all I have to say. See ya.